Hello and welcome to the Forward Unto Dawn podcast. On this show, we dive into the fiction of the Halo science fiction universe, wherever that leads. This is episode number 16. I am David Fuchs, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dani, a.k.a. Slightly Live.
Hardly, huh?
So it's been a while since we last recorded. I think actually, looking at our last episode was recorded a year and a day ago. And since we last talked, which was in December 2014, about Halo Broken Circle, there's been a whole lot of happening in the fiction world of Halo. Namely, there was Halo 2 Anniversary in the Master Chief Collection, there was New Blood, there was Saint's Testimony, there was Halo Last Light, there was Halo Hunters in the Dark, Halo Shadow of Intent, and Halo 5.
And Hunt the Truth, does that count as a separate thing?
That's true. That does the marketing Hunt the Truth podcast for Halo 5. So there's been a mess of stuff going on. We're not going to try to attempt to review everything that was gone while we were gone. We're going to talk about one of those things more in depth today. But I guess in terms of taking everything in aggregate, Dani, in terms of what we've seen in the past year, what are your general thoughts? What you liked, what you disliked, where you think that 343 has taken the fiction this year?
I think just to quickly note on what's come, I think that some of the books have been outstanding, some haven't been outstanding. But my favorite standout piece would have to be Hunt the Truth. I think that's taken our beloved fiction to a different audience, a different demographic, and it's expanded. It was obviously like on the back of the Halo 5 marketing, but I think what it did was absolutely mind-blowing, and I think if they can apply that sort of time and talent to new projects that aren't directly tied into a video game, just like an original sort of offshoot, I would be all for it, because Hunt the Truth is easily the best piece of fiction that they have produced in a long time.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's hard to pick favorites, but I definitely think that Hunt the Truth was basically sort of video gaming's answer to Serial, in terms of how in the past year, especially, people who didn't realize that podcasts were a thing are like, oh my God, podcasts are a thing. And it kind of sucks for the people who forget that podcasts have been a thing for years now, and especially in Halo, it's been going on since literally, I think, the day after iTunes added support for podcasts. But it definitely was something that was really interesting. It was great that we got a second season, and they managed to do something different with it. I think they were both really good. And it definitely was, I think, successful, because you talk about 6.7 million listeners on iTunes, and I don't think that's all hardcore Halo fans. Obviously, that's definitely a broader audience. Yeah,
definitely. I think as well is the fact that they put so much time and effort into it. They brought on a fantastic extended cast of really solid actors to bring really solid performances to the whole thing. Like Mark Hamill was in there even.
Mm-hmm.
They literally just snuck in so much just raw talent into that project, and it was great to see, you know?
Yeah, I didn't realize Keegan-Michael Key could actually do something serious, so that was interesting to hear.
And we got to finally hear Black Box.
What's his name? Peter Serafinowicz? I can never... It's something along those lines, but yeah, he was awesome, and I definitely think that they picked the right sound for Black Box.
The thing is that I think that a lot of people have been listening to the audiobooks for a while, and I think that the format itself has a lot of potential. You know what I mean? Like we don't need to stick with audiobooks. I think it's shown that if the time's put into an original creation via podcast, via serialized storytelling in that sort of way, there's definitely an audience for it, and it's an audience that won't pick up a book. You know what I mean? It's a different kind of audience, and they have a lot of time to fill. You know what I mean? And I think that's the sort of content I want them to fill it with.
And I definitely think overall they really have been pushing, because we got all these. Before, it was pretty straightforward. You got a book every so often, and we had the under 343, we had the Kilo 5 trilogy, and we had the Greg Bear's Forerunner trilogy, and now we're getting all these short little digital shorts, novellas. So there's a lot in addition to the big novel length books. So we're definitely getting a lot more and a lot more varied stories, which I think is great. And it sort of builds off what you were saying, where they're sort of taking advantage of, hey, there's all these new mediums available. People don't just read books. They don't just listen to an audiobook. They don't just play the games. I think in terms of my favorite, I would have to go with Halo Last Light. It was something that worked well. And I think it's one of those books that shows where the strengths of, if someone had asked, well, why bother writing, let alone reading a Halo novel? It's something that extends a corner into something we're never going to get in the games. It brings back established characters, gets you more time to sort of inhabit them, learn more about them. And it puts in little hooks that don't even necessarily need to be followed up in the future. But if they do, that's one of those things that fans really enjoy, drawing those connections.
Yeah. I didn't like the story. I didn't like it at all. And unfortunately, it hit all the wrong notes for me. I thought the whole cave stuff was just, I wanted to bury them and the story with it in there and just walk away half the time. It felt that it just wouldn't end. I thought the overall story about the Forerunner AI and the real mission to capture it was overshadowed by boring stuff. I don't know. It felt arduous going through it. You know, there was no mystery at all about it. There was no.
Yeah, I did think that this detective aspect was one of the most interesting parts, and that they sort of halfway through, it sort of ended.
Yeah.
Like it came up at the end, but by that point, yeah, you knew who it was, basically.
I didn't like that. I don't know. There was a lot of good ideas in the book. I don't think they gelled well. I was just glad it was over. And I was reading through it. I was like, God, please, this next chapter be it. Oh, God, no. They find another excuse for a couple of chapters. Flip sick.
Okay, so in terms of, would that be your pick for the weakest piece of Halo fiction that came out this year? Or you have some
God,
other?
it's coin toss up between that and Let's Visit the Ark 2.
Yes, which was Hunters in the Dark.
Like, that was so disappointing. Like, going back to the Ark post Halo 3, like, how could you mess that up? Like, it's
Yeah, that's one of those things I was definitely excited for it, because as I remember as a teenager, if you've never read Star Trek novels, I imagine it's the similar thing with the Star Wars expanded universe, but there was always a whole bunch of crap. You can say many things about the quality of Halo's expanded fiction, but Star Wars and Star Trek, I think, both have some really atrocious stuff that Halo cannot compare. And for me, the stuff that was good and that I really enjoyed was Peter David's, I think it was New Frontiers series. So I was super excited to have him doing a full-length Halo novel. And after reading Hunters in the Dark, I wasn't sure if I go back and reread the Star Trek novels, am I going to just think that they suck now? And it was just one of those things that as a kid, like, or as a teenager, I was like, oh, this is so good.
Yeah. Coincidentally enough, Troy Danning's a big Star Wars writer, actually. He appeared in some of the bigger EU novel series of Star Wars, which got retconned out of existence recently. So I had an idea of his writing style. He's actually a pretty good, solid, reliable writer. I've never actually had fault with his writing style or anything with it. Like I said, this book in particular, last night it wasn't badly written. You know, I think The Hunters in the Dark was badly written with a weak story.
Yeah, it just kind of, as you said, I think it's one of those things where taken on its own, it's okay, but it took a premise that people had been thinking about for so long and that they'd sort of teased, in other books they teased it in the if not the data drops, then definitely catalog posts on Waypoint, and then it was sort of part of the frame tale for Primordium. So we're like, oh, we knew someone had gone back.
Yeah, there was hints about going back to the Ark. It was something fans knew was going to happen at some point, and there was something going on there. So it was anticipated.
And also, I think the from by my reckoning, the opening to the I guess the sort of teaser for Hunters in the Dark, where it's like this guy who's slowly dying after getting attacked by these blind wolves, and suddenly this voice out of nowhere is saying, "Hey, do you want to live?" I think that was one of the most interesting openings of a piece of Halo fiction we got, and then it just kind of dissolved into not as interesting as that opening bit suggested.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think the one of the cardinal sins that the book committed was the threatening the galaxy again. It's, oh, by the way, all the Halo rings are going to activate. We're going to wipe out the entire galaxy unless we solve this thing. Oh, it's a galactic destruction thing. That's new. We haven't faced that threat before. We don't need that. That's what the games are for. You know what I mean? Like, Master Chief's work and sacrifice and all that stuff because he saved the galaxy. Well, we saved the galaxy in this book too. You know, it felt really out of place to have that sort of scale of threat looming over what is essentially a never mentioned again event. Yeah, and then you had what, a Sentinel invasion of Earth. I think people would have remembered that. Like, they kept banging on about the new it was no what do you call the thing from Halo 4 whenever the people got composed? What was the event they called it? The something event?
New Phoenix.
The New Phoenix event. Like, Sentinels invading Earth? Why isn't that an event that it's reminisced and talked about?
I don't think that in terms of civilian casualties it makes much of an impact, but the fact that they kind of imply that, oh, well, the home fleet was severely damaged, and right after, that just seemed, okay, wait, so we, in between Halo 3 and Halo 4, we lost the home fleet again? That was kind of strange.
Like, that's so weird, you know, that of the scale of what was supposed to be happening and what was at odds and what was at risk, and it's never really mentioned again outside of one or two wee minor references. So I didn't like that. Also, I'm completely ignoring the slogging through the snow that never ends, the half RoboCop guy at the end. Oh God! Oh, just really terrible. Everything's in that book.
Well, so where do you think the Halo fiction is going to go from here? Obviously, in Halo 5, there was a big status quo shift. I don't necessarily think.
So, I think right now we have a serious problem actually with the fictions in the Halo, because there's a massive change in the status quo. It screws the fiction. How can you have a story right now in the existing Halo universe post Halo 5 that doesn't entirely impact or is entirely impacted by Halo 5's conclusion? Apart from going into the past, and the past is a big bottomless pit to plunder from, you know what I mean? So,
I mean, aside from Hunters in the Dark, actually is one of the few pieces. And I guess Last Light takes place sort of the same time, but most between basically 2553 and the events of Halo 4, there's still a lot that hasn't been covered.
yeah, but I think the story has written them into a corner. And I watched the vid doc with Brian Reed and Frankie and Mr. Vociferous, and I it was an insight into the whole thing for sure, but I don't think it was an insight I kind of wanted, because we had Brian Reed really boldly telling and shouting about how he already knew the end of Halo 5 immediately before anything else was done. And if you think about where that ends, it's like, why would you want to end on that? Why would you want to put that there at that point? Because where can you go? Where's your sideways look after that point? Because the games will have to deal with continuing on that story. We might get glimpses, like we might get a book. A book would be fantastic. A look at maybe Cortana's journey, but it wouldn't be a long book. It would be a short story. But I don't think how else you could flesh that out.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe have a story about AI considering the options, but then again, like that's no. I honestly, I'm drawing blanks when it comes to continuing on Halo fiction. Should always be pushing beyond what you have in the games, and then the games come and cement the next big milestone, and then you get your fiction to fill in the gaps, basically. But as you said, we're not restricted to that rule. You can go back in time. We can go and explore that, but it feels as if we just got a major roadblock thrown in our faces, fiction wise, where again I can't see anything right now to fill that gap. And I definitely think it's a gap that needs filled.
Mm-hmm. I definitely don't think, because by my reckoning, 2014 and 2015 were basically way busier in terms of fiction than any other year. So I feel like in the wake of Halo 5 releasing, they're definitely going to dial that back. I want to say that because I know there's a bunch of people out there who don't like buying their books digitally and stuff, that there really should be an Evolutions Volume 3 or Evolutions 2, depending on how you quantify it, packaging up some of these things,
Yeah.
maybe with other short stories. Because to me, Evolutions is still the overall best piece of Halo expanded universe material out there. There's some books, like novels I like, I guess, overall more, but just in terms of the wide variety of stuff we got in Evolutions.
Yeah, that shotgun approach of throwing a lot of stuff in there was fantastic, because you got some really wildly contrasting stories and themes. But yeah, I don't think there is anything comparable in terms of diversity. In terms of Halo products out there.
Just to see where that goes in the year 2016 coming down on us.
We do have that story compendium that was just announced yesterday.
Mm-hmm. That would be Halo Mythos. We'll put show notes. In the show notes, we'll put links to all the stuff we're talking about. But in the last Cannon Fodder, Grimm Brother sort of teased out Halo Mythos. And it's interesting that they don't seem to be, it's not a revision to the encyclopedia. I'm not even sure how you would describe it, because it doesn't really fit into their previous pattern of visual guides and encyclopedias.
I think that Halo Mythos is the kind of product that Halopedia can't serve. It's the kind of product that we can't do as fans, because they can outdo us, if you know what I mean, in terms of, like, they're commissioning new art to officially, by the way, officially expand on things that never had art before, to illustrate things that has only been talked about and written about. And I think that's amazing and awesome. Like, that's exactly what I would want. Yeah, I want to see more things visually. And I know with Isaac's projects, he's tried to expand the visual repertoire through fan work in the past. But to see an official product that does that, to see an official product that takes the whole Halo story and condenses it down into a more digestible, well, here's your Forerunners to Master Chief story, you know what I mean? And it condenses that for a more general audience outside of websites and Halopedia, essentially. I think that's fantastic. Like, I would love to be able to reach that almost, like, it's almost like a primer for new fans. You just come down, sit down, read the book, and you'll be caught up just like me, you, and everyone else listening to this podcast.
Mm-hmm. And it was nice, even with the book we're going to actually talk about a little more, Shadow of Intent. And here's a female elite. Oh, wow. Like, and it's not just a kind of weird Japanese interpretation in Halo Legends. Those sort of illustrations really do go far in setting a tone, and then I guess being more evocative than words will ever be.
I've noticed that O'Connor got a lot of criticism. Frankie got a lot of criticism for a comment he made, and it was widely reported about Cortana in particular. He was asked, "Why is Cortana naked?" And I think it was just a general journalist who wouldn't be fully aware of the extended stories that Cortana is involved in, and the backstories that are given, and the sort of justification that exists. So Frankie, for whatever reason, explained about using her vulnerability as a weapon, and I could understand an outsider's perspective hearing that, and getting the whole sort of sleazy thinking that sounds really terrible sort of thing. That's not the impression you get. I know it's not the impression I've got as a fan playing through the games and seeing the extended fiction. But one thing I did notice is that with Halo 5, Cortana hasn't. She's smartened her look up, let's just say. And I think pushing for that and doing that and making that change was the right sort of course. And I see things like making even the female leads. There's a shipmaster in Halo 5. There's the character in this book. I think doing that is a push towards normalizing what maybe has been an imbalance, let's just say. It's like even in Halo 5's main roster, you have a very strong female presence on both teams. And I think that's definitely something that we should recognize and that we should support.
That's a good point. All right, so do you want to dive into the book then? Or the novella, I should say.
Sure thing. I know I wasn't rushing to read it. I wasn't looking forward to it. I was looking forward to anything by Mr. Staten continuing on with Halo.
Halo, Shadow of Intent, came out December 7th. It's a short digital novella, and it's written by Joe Staten. So you're saying you were looking forward to it. To me, aside from the incredibly regrettable sex scene at the end of Contact Harvest, I think Contact Harvest is my favorite Halo novel.
Yeah, for sure, man. I would actually agree with you on that. I think it isn't the best written Halo novel, but the fact it was written with someone with so much passion and conviction for the content that it helped put the story and put the whole reading experience somewhere above other pieces of fiction, for me at least.
And overall, we'll talk about things generally before we get into the nitty-gritty plot details. I liked Shadow of Intent. It took only probably an hour for me to read it. It's pretty breezy, but in that time, it manages to come up with a nice glimpse into events we already knew about and elaborating on them. It gives us a nice catch-up with what some characters are doing after we've seen them last and where they're going. It introduces some new characters who might come into play down the road.
For all the good things about it, and this will be maybe the only real negative that I want to just bring up so we can get it out of the way, is the use of the Doomsday weapon of the week.
Okay, yeah, so we'll get into that. You have any more general thoughts before we do?
I read it in 2 sittings. Well, maybe 2.5, 3 sittings, because I was busy with work, so it was my go to bed reading material, and falling asleep whilst I'm reading material. So I wasn't able to sit down in one big gulp. So it took me a wee while to go through it. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a nice, solid read.
If you haven't read it, I'll throw the spoiler horn here, and you can run away scurrying and come back later. And if you're still with us after that, we can sort of dive into the plot. It takes place in 2553. I was not entirely sure. There's some people who are quibbling about canonicity because I think a catalog post previously said that the Shadow of Intent, the supercarrier that plays a role in this, was refitted in 2553, and it's not at this point. And it was also there's some stuff about whether the brutes originally controlled it or the elites, which is kind of confusing. But I guess it takes place. My understanding was that it takes place basically right after the Kilo 5 trilogy, which takes place in like April, May-ish. So this is later on. And it starts out with a prophet, a Sanshayum, who we have not seen at all, I think, since... I can't think of any post-Halo 3 fiction we've gotten taking place in terms of chronologically that we've actually seen prophets. Oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm lying. There's one prophet in Broken Circle, and that's it.
There's nothing to indicate what's happening to them as a group.
Yeah, and we got the last information we got is that they were presumed to either be dead or they'd all just vanished and taken most of the engineers, in the Kilo 5 trilogy. But here we find the former Minister of Preparation, and he's also with a prelate, which is the big new thing, I think, that this novel introduces, is that the prophets generally have been thought of as sort of these sort of like decrepit race that grew dependent on these gravity chairs, except once they get to a certain age. And the prelates are the antithesis of that. They're basically genetically modified to sort of be like this elite core of soldiers. And most of them got destroyed along with High Charity in the events of Halo 2.
I kind of see them as the Swiss Guard, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
They're formidable compared to the average prophet.
But so these guys have a bunch of brutes and drones along with them, and they nuke a bunch of captured elites. And we find out that they have access to a mini Halo,
Which has never been mentioned until now.
which is, on one hand, makes sense and seems plausible. On the other hand, it's just still kind of goofy to me.
Let's destroy the microflood. Oh, wait.
Well, I mean, all right, you make the scale model of the thing before you build the entire giant thing. That makes sense. Just the visual to me is just kind of hilarious.
Yeah, it's... I said it was my one main complaint about the book, and it's really, really stupid, okay? They could have came up with any kind of Forerunner technology that had side effects, and they weren't even aware of the use of it or the proper use of it, and were using, say, a Forerunner nightlight as a doomsday device because it had the side effect of nuking the crap out. You know, they could have used any sort of like non-Halo related device that had some side effects, and because they were ignorant of the actual use of the device, they just used it to cook people. They could have done that, you know? They could have done 1,000,001 other explanations and devices, whatever's, and we went with a mini Halo because it's got a Halo on the title, and we got to squeeze a Halo in there somewhere.
So you were wanting something like in Stargate SG-1, they have a device basically built by their version of the Foreigners, the Ancients, that's supposed to heal people, but it has the side effect of turning people crazy and into zombies if you kill them.
Yeah, because whenever you don't appreciate and fully understand a technology, and that's what we're supposed to be doing with these Forerunners, we're not supposed to, especially the Covenant in particular, they didn't fully understand the usage and the potential of the things that they were using and stealing and borrowing from.
Well, there's the token, man, the Prophet of Truth really should have told me about this back when it mattered, line from, I think, the Minister of Preparation. So presumably they knew about it shortly before the fall of High Charity.
Like, did they fashion their little holographic Halo rings on their wee hats after the mini one? Or, you know, it's
I don't know. But so, well, to your point though, with the not really understanding it throughout the novel, it's the mini Halos sort of falling apart. So it implies either that they aren't using it right, or it was always unstable and basically they can't fix it. So it's sort of a limited duration.
What they need to do is find a little mini caretaker AI bot to fix it, and a little mini arc to take it to.
Maybe yes. Maybe there's this scale maquette version of the Arc they can take the mini Halo to, complete with a mini monitor that wants to kill everyone.
That's the game I want to play.
So as it sort of, we see this, basically they start out with they establish that the prelate and the minister have this mini Halo, and they're going to do something to get back at our favorite shipmaster Halfjaw, which I always thought was Ratas Vadum, and now I've totally forgotten the proper pronunciation, but Joe Staten said it differently. But I'll just use Halfjaw because that's what people refer to him anyhow. And I think actually that's one of those cases where I don't know if he even had a real name. And all the fans just called him Halfjaw, and that sort of stuck. Ship over to what Halfjaw's doing, and that's basically rolling around with the assault carrier Shadow of Intent and trying to stay out of the way of everyone on Sanghelios and the civil war that's going on there, because the Arbiter says basically this is too honkin' big ship to lose, and it could be a disaster, so go away.
How about we fully staff it and then use it? Oh wait, no. Yeah.
Well, that definitely, this book sort of ties in a little bit with what we saw in the Kilo 5 trilogy, and then sort of the payoff in Halo 5, where they realize even if you have the ships, like, do you have the crew? Do you have the people to maintain and staff them? And
yeah, but this is one badass ship. Like, you should have sacked 5 smaller ships or a dozen smaller ships to crew this big ass one, get it fully up. It's basically the Infinity strategy the humans are using, isn't it?
Well, they're not following.
Put all your hopes into one big ass ship that'll bully the shit into everyone else.
But so they're kind of going around on the fringes of space, and they end up at a Sangheli frontier colony, which was giving off a planetary distress call. And so they travel down. He's got a second in command, Vul Saron, who's a blade master, which I just like saying, blade master. And they discover that the colony's been attacked. A bunch of people got captured. And so the daughter of the Kadon basically says, I want to go after the people who attacked us, which turned out to be some prophet. And they realize that, this prophet has to be a prelate. And we thought we killed them all, but apparently not. And Halfjaw, against everyone's judgment, decides to take along the female, who's, I believe, Tool Jiran. It's horrible. Covenant names are bad. I just can never remember them unless I have them right in front of me. But yeah, so they're like, all right, you can come along with us. And we get a little bit about the rest of his crew. Besides the Blade Master, the only other major character in this is the Grunt Stolt, who actually commands a spec.
The Uber Grunt?
Yes, the Uber Grunt, who commands a Spec Ops team of elites.
He's more, the Grunt is more badass than a badass elite. Like, what?
I was trying to figure out, because they mentioned that he actually managed to, I mean, he didn't really win, but he managed to basically survive an encounter with a Spartan. And I wasn't sure if that was supposed to be a specific reference to any time we'd seen in the books or the novels.
Probably some bronze tear scrub.
It was just one of those things, like, I feel like I should know what they're referring to, but they didn't really give me enough details.
It was far too specific. Grunt encounter where Grunt kicks your ass.
And I definitely, because this is a novella, they don't really get a lot to do, but I really liked Stolt, especially since when people were talking about it on the halo.bungie.org forums, there were some people who didn't really buy the idea of this Uber Grunt. And I think that's one of the reasons that really need a character like that, because if you just play the games, you assume that they're kind of goofy cannon fodder. And if you get into the novels, you realize, I mean, I think especially, Contact Harvest had a important grunt in Dadab, and then I think Halo the Flood had Yap, I believe, or Flip Yap, or one of those grunt names. Also not particularly great for remembering, but who they showed that, hey, grunts they're not just cannon fodder, they're competent. There's a reason that they managed to almost overthrow the Covenant at one point and had to commission an arbiter to stop them.
Wasn't that just because they couldn't stop bunny rabbiting a bit?
Yes, they multiply like rabbits, but they can get that rabbit's dynamite.
Let us taunt it. It may become so cross that it will make a mistake. Like what?
And it was nice to have a character who, I mean, I love the comic relief, and I was glad that happened back in Halo 5, but they're also a real human, or not a human race, but a real alien race. You assume that they aren't just all the same. Also, apparently, I think actually introduced in Contact Harvest 2 is the idea that a lot of the grunts are basically stoned out of their gourds because they have narcotics they breathe in with their methane.
Yeah.
So that gives you another idea on why the ones we meet in the games aren't the sharpest tools in the shed. So Stalt was a cool little addition in here too. And so they've got all these guys on their ship, and they're following off, going to find this prelate.
One thing I wanted to point out that I really liked, it was a very throwaway moment, but it was definitely in there, was whenever Halfjaw is reflecting upon the damage that's caused to the colony. He gets a sense and appreciation for the violence and suffering the Covenant inflicted upon the humans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And actually, that's another good point, is that, like you said, there are these little tiny moments that I think you get a lot from. And one of the ones I really liked in here is the whole story is tied together by this bit from Sangheili mythology, where this guy's father was captured, and so this warrior goes off as his right to capture back his father, or his uncle rather, and they nearly escape, but he's shot and falls into the sea. And so the question is, in the mythology, was it the enemy who killed him, or was it his own uncle who betrayed him? And that, along with, they describe how this like kind of hinterland colony has different customs than Sanghelios, and how Tul Jiran's role as a woman is different there than it would be in Sanghelios. And I thought those were all really good additions, because I think there's always a problem in science fiction of your alien races being a monoculture.
Oh god, yes,
yeah,
definitely.
And especially, I mean, it really comes down to me, the example for the elites is the Klingons in Star Trek, because they both have this very feudalistic, Japanese-inspired warrior code.
Yep.
And what we've gotten a lot from the expanded universe is, but they're not all like that. We have the elites who are obviously way more pious than others, that Jul Mdama ends up finding. We have these guys who are kind of away from everything else, and they don't have the same rigid codes that the people on the home planet do. So, and along with the Stolt, it's nice to have these little shades that show you, hey, yeah, grunts are grunts and elites are elites, but they aren't all the same, just the same way that Ackerson is not the prototypical person, and that there are lots of, you've got Jacob Keyes, you've got Miranda Keyes, they're all different characters, and they all have different motivations, they're all different.
Yep.
And so that's really nice. So they go off on the Shadow of Intent to chase down these prophets, and we get a sort of a flashback in a dream with the prelate, who's named Tem Batek, and once again I will refer to him as prelate because Covenant names, geez. And he's sort of this sort of impressionistic dream, remembering back to High Charity. I wasn't sure exactly how much of this was supposed to be canon versus is just his own dream, because he describes, it's really interesting because we never got much about the flood in High Charity aside from a short story in Evolutions. And it was really interesting to see just the panic of everyone freaking out when the flood attack. And that was really great. Although he describes it as taking place during like this big celebration of the prophets having a new kid.
Yeah.
Which was once again like, oh, well, that's an interesting bit of the culture and it makes sense. But wait, wasn't there a civil war going on exactly at this time? Like, why is everyone celebrating? It seemed a little strange to me that I wasn't sure though, because he describes about how some parts of his dream definitely didn't happen, if that was sort of an amalgamation of.
No, I think it wasn't a civil war per se, wasn't it? It was the changing of the guard. It could have been like mainly a military sort of thing, kept out from the public. You know what I mean? Because High Charlie was a functional city as well,
Yeah.
and the military stuff could have just been literally a layer down below, or quite a lot down below. You know what I mean?
True.
Beneath the surface.
Still doesn't quite also, although things like Broken Circles discussion of High Charity also kind of gives a different flavor. But you're right that it's sort of the more civilian side versus the military focused characters that we've gotten before. But anyhow, the prelate's remembering how everything was going bad, and he had a wife and a newborn child that he was trying to reach, but the Shadow of Intent started realizing, oh wow, the Flood are taking over the city. We have to stop everyone from leaving, and from the Flood from getting out. And so that basically, and with all the prophets trying to, oh wait, we got to rescue our people. That explains why their master plan to kick out all the elites and destroy their ships sort of failed, and why the prelate is so pissed at the Shadow of Intent and Halfjaw in particular.
Yeah, he blames Halfjaw for dooming his wife to a very unpleasant demise.
Yeah, and which is definitely something that they didn't focus on too much in the books, but which is another thing. Yeah, everyone had a not so great time getting horribly killed and infested by the Flood on that city. And we sort of just skip from, oh, the Flood are here, to it's a wasteland in Halo 3. So it was nice to get some more elaboration on that.
I think Wasteland's putting it mildly, but okay.
Poo-colored wasteland, just for you. So here, the following, basically, they realize, well, we can figure out where the prelate went, but it's probably a trap. And so they end up encountering the enemy cruiser, the Spear of Light, in this system. And the prelate basically tricks them.
I thought that was very nice, by the way. I really thought that was really nice. It's typical of that elite mindset to go hit hard and hit fast, and taking advantage of that was really nice. I thought that was a joy to read.
Well, it was also nice because one of the reasons that Contact Harvest is probably one of my favorite books is that it's less heavy on the military science, like techno, like I guess Nylandian details. But one of the things that I think Halo recently hasn't had was these sort of interesting space combat pieces, and this was a good one because the prelate basically uses this, which I think came up in First Strike, but the idea that if you get so close to a coronal mass of a star, basically, that the radiation will start draining your shields and everything. So he uses that to take out the shields of the Shadow Intent, and then he gets up close and basically uses escape pods to jump into and occupy the Shadow of Intent. And this is after a fiendish plan to basically lure them in close so that they could use the mini Halo to nuke everyone on the ship first, which Halfjaw manages to avoid. And so then they get into hand-in-hand combat with the prelate and his boarding party.
Yep.
And so they fight it out. Stolt gets injured. The prelate gets captured, and then he escapes again.
Not before we heart-to-heart.
Yes. They have the heart-to-heart between Halfjaw and the prelate, and the prelate basically blames him for everything, and Halfjaw says, well, I did stop everyone from getting out, but they were still alive when I was stopping that, and I feel bad about it. And the prelate realizes that doesn't jive with what he learned from the minister, who said that everyone, including your daughter or your son, and I don't even know if the prelate knows the gender of his child, but his wife and child were dead by the time he got there. And so that's why the prelate rescued the minister and got out of there.
Yeah, he thought he was too late, and that they were dead at that point. He thought.
Yeah. So suddenly he's all conflicted about this. Did the Was the minister lying to him just to use his desire for revenge? But he manages to escape when the elites go down to the installation where the mini Halo is. The minister reveals his fiendish plan, which is to basically burn the mini Halo in a big pulse to destroy Sanghelios. And they were going to use the Shadow of Intent to power it, basically, and move it. And he also admits, why do you admit these things, evil people, and when you're doing your plans? But he admits to the prelate, yeah, I kind of did lie about your wife and child because I knew that I needed to get out of there and you were my only chance, and I thought I could use your desire for revenge.
He really should have just doubled down on the lie.
Yeah, like...
He really should double down and went full in, and made up extra details and the rest of it just to keep him on board and keep him on the right side so as he can finish the plan. But no. Bad guys for you.
Yeah, but so the minister decides he's going to just blow them all up away with the Halo while he retreats down to a bunker, but mortally wounded, the prelate has a change of heart and sacrifices himself to destroy the mini Halo, kill the minister and his group, and the elites all escape back to the Shadow of Intent. And then they return to one of the previous elite colonies. Halfjaw contacts the Arbiter, brings him up to speed, and he tells him that what they learned from the Prophet's ship is that a lot of prophets actually did survive High Charity. And so instead of relaxing and getting some R&R, Halfjaw decides that he's going to go out to find those surviving prophets and bring the evildoers to justice. And
so are we going to get like a Prophet Hunter comic book or what?
And he talks to the Arbiter and says, hey, we should probably let these females fight alongside of us. And he says, yeah, it's probably true. And so Tolgeron joins Halfjaw's crew, and they go off in search of adventure. And that's the end of the story.
They all lived happily after.
Well, that remains to be seen, because obviously Halfjaw is nowhere to be found in Halo 5, although this sort of sets up the appearance of the female shipmaster in Halo 5, who helps you out as part of Fireteam Osiris.
Yep.
And so, any final thoughts?
Like I said, solid book, solid read. Book, short story, but yeah. Give me more.
I think in terms of the mini Halo, confusing. I think in terms of things I didn't like about this book, honestly, I think Tool Duran's story is honestly the part I dislike, because you made a good point about how I think Halo has always been a good series for good female characters who aren't just in the background or irrelevant.
Foehammer!
Yeah, I mean, you had Foehammer delivering early on, but you've had Miranda Keyes. You obviously have Halsey, who is basically
Hitler.
Besides being Hitler and evil, she's basically, I would say, beyond Cortana and the Chief, she's the most important character of the series. But I definitely think that you're right that they've definitely been pushing it harder, and I don't want to say pushing in necessarily a bad way, but they've made it a definite goal.
Yeah,
which is fine in most respects, but I feel like, unfortunately, in this case, Tool's story is something we've seen before, and it doesn't really add much to the story, because the headstrong woman who's held back by we've kind of gotten that already in various forms, and so I wouldn't say it didn't really hurt the book. It also didn't really add much to it.
As a link maybe into our next topic, I would say that maybe she had more personality than some of the other recent females that have been introduced to Halo.
That's definitely true. She does. You do get more of a sense of her, even if she's sort of a trope. And I was glad for a brief, tangible second. I was deathly afraid that suddenly this would turn into like a romantic character for Halfjaw or something, and it didn't go that way at all. So you're like, okay, all right, good. So yeah, I guess she didn't do much, but then again, since feel like this could have ultimately, they talked about it sort of started out as a novel, or it started out as a short story, then it grew to a novella, then it grew to a novel, and then it went back down. I think Shadow of Intent could have, with a little more meat on it, been a full novel.
Yeah.
And maybe these characters would all have gotten stuff. I hope they show up again, because I think my concern about her role in this aside, I think Stolt and her and Halfjaw should all come back, and they'd be great characters in another story.
Yeah, I think it's indicative of the kind of writer that Staten is that even in a shorter story sort of framework, he's managed to introduce really interesting characters and put things in just a very entertaining way, really, with Halfjaw in particular.
Yeah, he apparently said in the recent Halo live stream that he doesn't get much time much chance to write in his new job at Microsoft. So I would
What
say,
are they doing with him? He's
Yeah,
not
I don't
making
know.
Halo, so they're not using him right.
but so I can only hope that if he isn't writing, then that gives him the desire to write more stuff for Halo in the future, because I definitely like him back.
Definitely put me on that bandwagon.
So you've alluded to it, but as part of our Kickstarter rewards, we offered people at one of the tiers the chance to suggest a topic for something we talk about either in an article, write an article about it on forwardontodawn.com, or talk about. And some of them we decided, oh, this is better for a podcast. And so one of them, suggested by Jason Lennox, was Spartan Locke, the new face of Halo. And so we thought we'd talk about that. Spartan Locke. We've gotten him in, I guess, the Halo 2 terminals a little bit. We got him in Nightfall, and now we got him in his real
Halo
real
2
outing.
anniversary terminals. Just make sure we state that.
Oh yes,
specifically.
The Halo 2 anniversary terminals. So we've seen him in the Halo 2 anniversary terminals, in Nightfall, which came with the Master Chief Collection, and now we got him in Halo 5, along with a boatload of new characters, or new and returning characters new to the game series. And I guess the first question is, do you think that he is supposed to be the new face of Halo or not?
Yeah. Well, obviously, he is. Ignoring intent and wishes and wants, he is on Halo products. He's the front dude on a lot of Halo products. You can buy your little Locke figurine, Halo figurine. You know, it's. There's no real ambiguity here, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely interesting. I think a lot of people sort of surmised that based on the reception that the sequence of materials we got after Halo 4 and the reception to Sarah Palmer, that at some point Sarah Palmer was supposed to be like the new big character of Halo, and that
if that was
Locke.
their intent, they failed so hard.
Well, yeah, I don't. The interesting. I think that's definitely a popular kind of conspiracy theory. I think in one of the Halo Waypoint sort of developer diaries that we got pre-release, they mentioned that basically Locke's character was always supposed to be on this team. At one point, Fireteam Osiris did include Sarah Palmer, but they decided that she would be better in another role.
It also includes Thorn as well.
Yes, Thorn from Spartan Ops. So definitely Spartan Ops characters sort of got a shaft in Halo 5.
I'm almost convinced that the whole Osiris team was basically supposed to be a Spartan 4 team spinning out from Spartan Ops.
Well, that's the original. There was at one point discussion whether or not Majestic would be Fireteam Osiris, or what would become.
Yeah, like that. If you look at it from our perspective, just as fans look at it, it does make sense that they would build up this team, this Spartan team with the fours, and then build off that for the sequel. It makes perfect sense. The only thing that got in the way is the fact that they did a terrible job with the Spartan Steel.
I think looking back on Spartan Ops, the idea of they kind of decided, oh, well, it'd be cool if you could use your own character, multiplayer character in these missions. And then we also want to tell the story through cutscenes. And I'm not sure if having what is your team even called in Spartan Ops?
Exactly.
I don't even know, because
you're making a good point right there.
You have Fire Team Majestic, who you see in cutscenes, and it was always divorced from what you were doing in game, which was kind of weird.
Fire Team not as important.
Yeah, so basically, I don't think that people had issues with the Spartan 4s in general, and I think that really all we got was DeMarco got a good death in Escalation, and Thorn was always the most likable character in Spartan Ops to me. And he got...
Yeah, the problem is that people thought the Spartans were too much... They're too much like frat boys and rather than super elite trained soldiers.
Yeah.
And I think we got a glimpse into that in the Halo 5 beta, where during the victory poses for the teams, they were high-fiving each other and butt-slapping and fucking drinking beer, I believe. I can't remember.
I honestly like the celebration stuff compared to where we got in the final game. But basically,
final game, they look like they're standing around sniffing their own farts. I think that's also the wrong way of doing it. But
if Danny had his way, they would all have tipped their top hats and raised a pint and said, "Cheerio!"
That would be so awesome. What if they did that?
Hey, there's still a chance for downloadable requisitions, your victory poses. F343, listen, we've given you great ideas here. Printed money. But yeah, they talked about Fire Team Majestic, and despite getting some stuff in Escalation, I definitely think, aside from Thorn, there wasn't a lot to work with, so they decided early on to come up with this tracker character who was going to be former Oni, and that's what ended up being Locke.
Forward only sale, the only stuff, pathetic. The Nightfall only stuff, pathetic.
Yeah, and definitely in terms
only
of...
are supposed to be spooks, you know what I mean? They're supposed to be like dodgy guys in dodgy shades doing things that you're not supposed to entirely comprehend because they're only, they're acting in your best interests. This guy's he's a muscle-headed moron.
I think the only time it really comes up in his character is in the Halo 2 anniversary terminals. We get a sort of dossier written by him talking about assassinating Arbiter.
Oh yes, his plans to kill Arby. Ooh, he's such a badass. He's going to kill someone we like. Ooh.
Yeah, which I mean, it's story shorthand. You hang a lantern.
Who wrote it? Like, what was it? What was only his idea for assassinating the Arbiter with? Like, what were they smoking?
And then so we got Nightfall, and I honestly had to say before watching Nightfall, and then I know a lot of people were kind of harshing on
Nightfall was a mistake.
Mike Coulter's voice work in the Halo 2 anniversary stuff. I honestly, watching just those things, I would have kind of agreed that, yeah, this guy seems kind of wooden and not really into acting.
He got his ass handed to him by the fact that he was literally up against the Arbiter's voice. Like, God.
Keith David, I think, is in the James Earl Jones level of gravitas to your... Yeah, so they ended up replacing him with Ike Mzadi, who I think did a better job than the stuff we heard.
Yes.
Also, to be fair, he got replaced not because people disliked his voice, but because he went off to do the Netflix series Jessica Jones and now Luke Cage. And watching those, I'm like, oh, well, he can act. So I feel...
Yeah.
Whatever the issues of Nightfall, it was not solely his fault.
Yeah, I really enjoyed his character in Jessica Jones. Yeah. So the guy can do work, you know.
Yeah.
Don't know what happened in Nightfall. Nightfall just seems like a mistake.
Yeah, I think
everyone. It's
in terms of introducing Locke, it kind of fails because it's sort of an irrelevant story where the best parts were the second stories, the little supplemental additions that you got. The I forget the director, but it was produced by Ridley Scott, and this is just another example of where A, Ridley Scott, not the greatest name in science fiction now, and B, produced by doesn't mean that they have a whole lot to do with the actual resulting quality, I guess.
Like from what I hear, there was some creative differences between certain parties.
So Nightfall, not exactly the greatest introduction to Locke, so we mostly just go off what you get him in Halo 5. And I think...
He's got a nice beard.
Yeah, very nice beard.
facial hair.
He definitely... I mean, there's definitely some... Like, he's pushing the uncanny valley at points, but he looks good. Just see the sun glistening off his shiny head.
Yeah. But I don't want to see Locke. Locke was such a disappointment from his first initial reveal in Nightfall, as we said. And then Halo 5, the whole fake thing with the Chief, where it was supposed to be a big deal and, oh, everyone's going to hate you for doing this, and it's, oh, yeah, it was Hunt the Chief, and, it just felt like a couple of angry boys shouting at each other and playing little fisticuffs.
Well, yeah, I think there's kind of two issues with Locke as a character, and one is that, yeah, like the whole Hunt the Truth marketing stuff was about in true Halo fashion, was misleading. It was not a major component of the campaign, and also, so the whole tension between Locke and Chief was never going to be that important. And then the other problem is that Locke is one of 3 new characters on one team, and you aren't playing with him the entire time. And so, really, I think the problem is that same with the rest of Fireteam Osiris, he gets broadly sketched out, but we don't get much, really, even for him to react to.
Do you know what I think is really sad? Locke is the front and center of his fire team, of Team Osiris. He's the other half of Master Chief, essentially, according to the story. He's a big guy. He presses a big button at the end, remember. Very important to press that button. Only he could button press it. And whenever I was playing through Halo 5, I just kept thinking every single time that Buck had more personality in one ass cheek than Locke had in entirety.
I mean, to be fair, like, he's really not any more or less interesting than Chief was in the first games. The problem is that I think 343 rightly decided that you can't just have a faceless character for people to care about, and so storytelling has moved on.
No, but no. The thing is that no, Buck was there. Buck should be leading the team. He's the one with the personality. He's the one with the face you recognize. He's the one who actually starts cracking jokes. And this is Mr. Stoic and bored. Oh, there's aliens, is there? Let's go kill the aliens because that's what I do.
Well, that might be. I mean, because they talk about how Buck was, until fairly late in development, was Thorn. I'm wondering if they knew Nathan Fillion was going to be around from the get-go. If, like you said, it might have made sense for him to be the leader of Fireteam Osiris.
If he was the leader, it would have been so different. There would have been a strong, identifiable, personable personality pulling you along. You would have understood better the context in which everything was happening. I think his reactions to things as a leader would have been a lot more interesting. Him talking to the Arbiter would have been balling. So interesting. I would love to have seen that. And him fighting the Chief, he looks up to the Chief. You could actually you get that sense about him that you already know him. And you know what he would respect the Chief. He doesn't have to say, I respect him a lot. Yes, he's the reason why I'm here. You don't need to say all that stupid stuff because it would just be inherent on what you'd expect from the character and what you're bringing to the character.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God. In
this alternate universe, we have just created the alternate Halo 5 with...
Yeah, I just did.
More
and I
Nathan
like
Fillion.
that version better now.
Well, I mean, more Nathan Fillion is generally a good idea.
Maybe next game we might have someone we might care about.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I mean, while there were definitely some missed opportunity for Locke, like you say, I think that they probably are committed to having him in some role because, I mean, that's the ultimately the backdrop to all these discussions is, yeah, like, I don't think Steve Jones retired from his radio show. I think like he's getting older. There's only so long that Master Chief, like for practical and for story reasons, can be the tentpole. So you have to come up with something. And I think
I am all for Halo stories without the Chief, right? I don't think the Master Chief is intrinsic to Halo any longer because the universe is literally too big for one man to be everywhere at all times ever.
there's still, I mean, there's, like I always say with people who got upset about Sarah Palmer, like she killed their puppy or something, that there are really no bad characters. There's just bad writing.
Yeah.
And so I think there's still, especially since I think the vocal performances in Halo games have always been solid, the voice acting part of it, I think that it's really, he can go up. I think that you're right that they're going to keep him around, and that means that next game, like next book, yada yada yada, there's still plenty of chances to improve a character, and that nothing that, unfortunate though it might be, locks sort of non-entity, as you say, to just someone who's there. They can always improve that. All right, so you want to talk about anything else?
Not really. I think we're good right now.
Yeah, so on that note, that brings us to the end of this topic and this episode. Thanks for listening. If you can subscribe to this podcast via iTunes, you can catch the new episodes on our website or via YouTube if that's what strikes your fancy at youtube.com/forwarddawn. You can engage with us at Twitter at twitter.com/forwarddawn or leave a comment on the website or in our forums at assembly.forwarduntodawn.com. Thanks for listening and see you next time.
See ya.